How do we feel about degrees?
Degrees?
Yeah.
Nah, I won't do that.
I'll have one.
You'll have one.
If there's going. The cost of a college degree.
Yeah.
I'm going to do this in dollars because I imagine the majority...
Australian or Canadian?
Canadian.
Yeah.
Imagine the majority of our fans, listeners, lovers, sort of followers, if anything.
Disciples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will be working in dollars.
Can we call our fans disciples?
Yes.
You know how Lady Gaga has little monsters?
Little monsters.
We just have disciples.
We'll have disciples, like Jesus.
Yeah. No, a lot like Jesus. Yeah, no, that's...
But two Jesuses.
Two Jesuses. So
Because
really,
two are better than
twice
one.
as good as Jesus, in a sense.
In all the senses.
Well, yeah, in the only senses that matter.
The cost of a college degree has risen 1,120% since 1978. At a higher rate.
Is that adjusting for inflation or what?
At a higher rate than food, health, housing and inflation.
Right. What is it, 1,000?
1,120%.
So that's like 11 times more?
Yeah, 11 and a bit, 11.12. With America now being £1.1 trillion in student loan debt.
I mean, what is going to happen with degrees? What's happening there?
Well, as a student, I took my time getting there, but I am now a student once more.
Yeah. You're a university student now.
Yeah.
I'm not.
This is...
I didn't go.
It's a big deal. The money side of it is such a huge, massive deal. But the degree system is being so massively devalued.
Yeah.
That you're forced to do it because everything, to a certain extent, requires it. Jobs which you get as part-time summer jobs, as a full-time job now require like an undergraduate degree, a bachelor's degree, wherever you are. And there are very few other options to a certain extent. You feel like that. It's become an added part of the system. Education, legally, you have to do up to a certain age. When we left school, it was 16. Now it's 18. And you feel society, culture, etc. means you have to go and do it again.
Yeah. A lot of it is redundancy. A lot of it is like, there's this extra redundant part to the system that a lot of people feel doesn't matter, but that doesn't affect it. Like, whether it matters or not, you feel like you have to do it.
Yeah.
Just by virtue of the fact that it's there. You know, it's another box to tick. You have to tick it. You
have to jump through another hoop.
Yeah. An expensive hoop.
But it's one of those things that you think, we're putting... These are American figures, and it'll be less for the UK, but UK is a smaller country, so in those terms it'll be just as big.
Yeah.
But you think that 1.1 trillion that you're already in debt and people have to pay off is basically coming out of the economy.
Yeah.
And we're in a recession. Yeah. Whether we're now out of that recession, as people claim we are, we're not. For the past few years, we've been in a double dip recession.
Yeah.
And if that student debt doesn't exist, that money goes straight into the economy.
Yeah.
You leave university, you leave whatever it is, and then as soon as you earn a certain amount of money, you're paying a chunk of your wage back. Whereas that chunk becomes free spending money if you don't have it.
Yeah.
And so that money, when I leave university, I'll have to pay however much I have to pay to the government. If I don't have to pay that to the government, I pay that into services. I pay that into buying goods which are taxed and VAT'd. I pay that into other systems. And when the economy is so bad as it is currently, to take out such a huge amount of money is such a crazy... I think it's the next bubble to go. We've had the housing, we've had economy as a whole, really.
The whole degree bubble, the education bubble, I suppose.
It's going to have to explode at some point. And it's terrifying, really, that we live in a cycle of sort of debt slavery. And so you leave college, high school, whatever it is, at 18, you go into university, you've just become an adult, your whole life is then indebted.
Yeah.
You have student loans, you leave that, you get a job, you want to buy a house, you've got a mortgage, it's lying over your head. You're paying everything you own, you're then paying insurance on top of. you're paying taxes on top of,
Yeah.
which are all debts to a government.
Yeah.
And so throughout your life, you're living in debt. And so you come out of that, you come out of university, how much in debt? You're paying off. You get a mortgage, you're paying off. You're trying to earn money to pay those off, and then somehow have enough money to put enough away for a pension or a retirement fund. And there's simply just not enough money or enough time, and something's going to have to give.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what that something is.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's clear to everyone, at least, that this whole thing's fucked.
The system doesn't work.
Yeah, the system obviously doesn't work.
But the system
never did work.
Is the system you have to get into.
Yeah.
You have very few opportunities to not be in that system of debt, whether it's student loan or mortgages or anything. To live a life free of debt is almost unheard of.
That's me. I'm living a life free of debt. I have no debt.
Currently.
Hello. Yeah, currently, right now, as a 21-year-old, I have no debt.
But if you buy a house tomorrow,
I'll have debt.
You have debt because you have to get a mortgage.
Yeah.
I don't know your financial situation. I don't think you have.
Great.
I don't think you have $100,000 to buy a house in cash.
Don't you? Have you heard of podcasts?
Hello. It's scary to think that your whole life is indebted to somebody else.
Yeah, but it's only your whole life is only indebted to somebody else if you consider your whole life to be your bank account. And I think hand in hand with this huge increase in debt is almost this necessary awakening among people our age who are realising that money isn't that important. And maybe it's a false realisation. Maybe it's going to bite us in the arse when we realise that, oh, none of us have enough money to feed ourselves and clothe ourselves. But at the same time, we have. I mean, it's not 100% of people our age, but let's say 10% even of people our age are awakening to the fact that, you know, money isn't the end of the world, and just very simply awakening to the fact that these social games that we play are games, and they're not the reality. They're not real. Like, money isn't real, countries aren't real, debt isn't real, the economy isn't real. These are concepts that we all agree upon and hold. And these are things that 20-year-olds, like 20, 30 years ago, didn't really think about, as far as I'm aware. Or if they did, it was a few of them smoking loads of weed. Like, now, this is something that a lot of people are realising and thinking.
A lot of people realise and think it, but we live in a society that doesn't realise and think it.
No, yeah,
so
that's
I can
true.
sit here and say, money isn't important, debt isn't
Yeah.
debt isn't important, countries etc.
Yeah.
aren't important, but I have to.
You have to live in that society.
I have to live in that society. Yeah. So I come out of university with zero guarantees.
Yeah.
And we now live in that recession where employment as a whole is completely scarce.
Yeah.
Especially for somebody with little to no experience. So you either have to accumulate more debt, gaining that experience, and working, internships, unpaid experience, or you have to take minimum wage jobs which you consider below you.
Yeah.
And while that is a problem with society that we consider jobs below us.
Yeah. We have high standards when it comes to jobs.
But that's a norm.
It really is.
If you go through education and you go through what is told to you from an early age as advancing yourself as a person and advancing your job opportunities, and you come out and all that's offered to you is minimum wage retail work, then you're going to think this is below me.
Yeah, yeah.
And it, to a certain extent, it is below you, because we live in a society where employment should be. I don't know if it should be, but if you have little to no education, you're only going to a certain point, unless you really make something of yourself.
Yeah.
Really, your ceiling is a very certain level. Whereas educating yourself should mean that it's a higher ceiling, and it's not. That's the situation.
Yeah.
And that's a scary world to live in, especially as a student, because nothing is guaranteed for you.
Yeah.
And it devalues everything you're doing. If you go into university saying you pay all this and you get a horrible amount of debt, but as soon as you graduate, we hand you a job at X wage. And yes, you pay that off, but you pay it off comfortably. You're happy.
I've been thinking of getting a job at X wage.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What wage? 1 mil?
1 mil.
One
but
cool
I think
meal a day.
X wage is my favourite DVD shop. So I thought I'd get a job there. I was going to work in appliances in X wage.
X wage.
But our local X wage only does DVDs.
Oh,
So, you know.
dull.
I think all of these problems, I don't want to keep coming back to it, but like, whenever I think all of these problems, like the big problems at the minute that people think of are usually financial or something, or anything to do with civil liberties like gender and race and stuff like that. These are the big problems that people come to. These are all conceptual problems. Like, if we had a war, we wouldn't give a fuck about any of this. These are all of these problems seem like very real, tangible, huge problems, but they're not. They're all conceptual. They don't.
Yeah, but you
To a certain point, after like 10 times removed, they become tangible. But like as they are, ultimately they are to do with conceptions. They're not like, oh, there's a fucking lion in my garden, or like there's a Taliban shooting at me. Like if we had another World War II, we wouldn't give a fuck about any of this. And that's a good way to put it into perspective. These seem like huge problems.
But that's putting it into perspective with what ifs. We're not living in that.
Yeah,
you can
but we
only
are,
empathise to a certain extent with what you experience.
But when I say what if we had a war, what I really mean is what if we had any problems that had something to do with our sense organs, you know, which is the world we live in. We do live in a world of sense organs. We live in a world of eyes and tongues and fingers and noses. You know, none of these problems activate those senses. If we had any sort of problem that intervened with our sense organs in any way, which is the world that we live in, that's the world that we live in on a day-to-day basis, then our perspective would completely change. I think this is just a case of people who live in paradise and just have raised their expectations to the point where the not perfect part of perfection seems terrible.
Yeah, that's true. If you compare yourself to Dave in Eritrea, who doesn't have enough food to see out the week, then these problems are fickle, meaningless problems.
They are. I mean, that's all I'm saying. I'm just trying to put it all into perspective of, like, if you compare these problems to the human organism, to the human species, like, when's the last time you broke a bone, you know?
A couple of years ago.
Like, I've only ever broken one bone. There are so many people our age who have never broken a bone, never really had a serious injury, never really been to the hospital for anything, like... And these people, rightly so, like, whatever... But these people still find something to complain about and be upset about on a regular basis.
But you can only, to a point, you can only empathise with what you experience. That's why we're not all giving the food we don't eat to charity. That's why we're saying, oh, I'm not going to give 20 quid to charity. I'm going to, you know, just spend it on booze.
Yeah.
Because you can only really empathise with your environment.
Yeah.
And so while we can say, well, look, we're probably
healthy.
the best humanity has ever been.
Yeah.
We're the most comfortable. Nothing is attacking... You know, England as a whole, nobody's attacking our shore. Nobody's attacking the island. Nobody's trying to actively kill us. We're out of the food chain. We're out of everything. There is nothing stopping me living life without any threat of any kind. I'm not going to die of starvation. I'm not going to... The worst thing that happens to me is I get a disease of some kind. I get cancer tomorrow and I die. You know, that's awful, dreadful, whatever. But we don't live with peril round the corner constantly.
No.
And because we don't, and because the majority of people we know don't, to understand that is very difficult.
I think that what happens really is that we live in a world without any immediate peril. So because we live in a universe where there's always something above you and there's always something below you, we're right at the top of our food chain. We're right at the top. Like there's no peril, there's no danger. So we have to invent our own danger. We have to invent things like the housing bubble and the economy and, you know, all of these conceptual things that don't really exist if you really look at it. but these things that do seem dangerous and do feel dangerous and do cause us anxiety. Because if we didn't have those things, we wouldn't feel human. And a part of the human experience, part of the experience of anything that exists is to, well, not anything that exists, but a part of the experience of any animal is to dominate something and be dominated by something else. And because we're in this situation where we're not really dominated by anything in a tangible sense, we have all of these conceptual things that dominate us, like the economy and like degrees.
Governments.
Yeah, governments.
Yeah.
These things that are so abstracted and far removed, and it's like a very strange situation where we're living this life of total unbalance, because the things below us are very tangible. The things below us are like chicken breast and, you know...
Yeah, well, it's the argument, would you rather be dominated by governments that force you to be in debt your entire life?
Yeah.
Or governments that kill you? Or animals that kill you? Or poverty?
Well, I think
and war.
The problem is that everyone would say, well, I would rather just never experience anything bad ever. But then if you never experienced anything bad ever, it's a very obvious cliche thing to say, but you don't have a concept of what is good.
Yeah.
And you need real suffering in your life. You need it.
But isn't that a cop-out answer to issues such as debt and education?
Oh yeah, this is a massive cop-out. This is obviously...
I don't argue that you don't need hardship in life, because you definitely do. But hardship you experience shouldn't be forced upon you.
No.
You shouldn't be forced into hardship paying bills, choosing whether to pay your college debt or paying your gas bill. Hardship should come from life dealing you a rough hand occasionally, because that's how life works. You occasionally get up, you break your leg, your mum dies, whatever levels it is, they're out of your control.
Yeah.
And those issues that are out of your control may change you as a person and make you who you are.
Yeah.
But issues which shouldn't be an issue being an issue, if that makes sense. Like debt. I don't think you should be forced into 10, 20, 30, your lifetime of debt.
Yeah.
By trying to further yourself as a person. That's the issue.
But what if... Imagine if you tried to further yourself as a person and there were no consequences. There were no negative consequences. Like, it wasn't difficult, it was easy, there was nothing wrong with it.
But doing that is difficult.
Yeah, but imagine if it wasn't, though.
But surely the task of educating yourself and going through systems and working hard to get those degrees is the task in itself.
It is.
In the same way that if you don't go to university, you get an entry-level job at whatever company, and you work 9 to 5 for 30 years, making yourself a better person and moving yourself up the ladder. You're not indebted to that, other than the work you put in. Nothing bad comes of that. The only downsides of that are the difficulty of it.
Yeah.
And degrees are difficult.
Yeah.
On top of that, should you have 50, 60 grand of debt?
Yeah.
No, arguably not. Understandably, these things have to be funded from somewhere.
Yeah.
But we're at a point now where there's no limit to it.
Yeah.
To a point where universities can charge anything.
You're at a point where the cons and the pros just aren't balanced anymore.
No. You're at a point where education is free for a long time and then suddenly becomes as much as you want. And we live in a society where a degree is already massively undervalued, but if you allow tuition fees to increase, you get to a point where it becomes elitist.
Yeah.
And you get to a point where you say, I can't afford to go to university on my own. I have to borrow and I have to get into the cycle of debt.
Yeah.
And if that's something you're not willing to do, then you cannot further yourself as a person.
Yeah.
And if we live in a society which puts furthering yourself as a person behind money, then there's something quite obviously wrong with the society itself. If the society is keeping people who want to further themselves down because they haven't got the finances, then something is fundamentally wrong.
Yeah, but how the fuck do you fix any of that? I mean, one of the big problems is that we're in too deep when it comes to all of these things we've been talking about. Like we were talking about food earlier on. We're in way too deep. Who can possibly fix any of that?
But because we're in too deep, should we just go, well, you know?
I don't know what we should do. I've sort of
if you're
opted out of
drowning in the
thing.
deep end, do you accept that you're drowning?
I don't know.
No, you try.
I didn't get into the deep end.
Naturally, you try and
Swim against
fight
it.
that and swim against it. And some people fail and some people get out.
Yeah.
Like, what can you do other than say this is wrong?
I mean, it's just... I think that we're experiencing higher education coming to a head. Because higher education has existed for like 1,000 years, I think. Around 1,000 years. Like, when did Oxford... When's the
the oldest university is in Egypt, and it's been around for a long, long time.
Like, I mean, the concept of elitist education has been around for a long time, and it's been a part of so many cultures, and you know, it's ingrained itself into our society. And now we're experiencing this strange shift in our society where suddenly all sorts of barriers have been broken down by the internet. All sorts of barriers, language barriers, class barriers, money barriers have been broken down by the internet.
Oldest university was established in 859.
There you go, that's fucking ages ago. That's a long time ago. That's before some civilizations, you know, that's like a long time ago. I mean, I think like Aztecs were like 10 something or other. But anyway, that's like... It's been a part of our culture for so long, and a part of so many different cultures for so long. And now it's coming to a head where it's just reversing and changing and doing a backflip. I mean, I don't even know what it's doing. But we're getting to a point where higher education is becoming normal education. And like, what do you do there? What do you do in that situation? What replaces higher education when universities become something that is expected of people? Because higher education serves a purpose. It's to distinguish hard workers and talented people from the rest of society. Not in an elitist way, but in a way that says, look, here are the people who are going to make a big difference to society. And everyone's going to make a big difference in the sense that, you know, every farmer and every painter makes a difference in some sense. But here are the people who are going to, like, come up with new ways to remove appendixes and shit like that. So what becomes that? What replaces that? What is it that replaces our way of distinguishing people? How do we distinguish people now? Now that higher education is such an accepted thing, and even research, even scientific research is getting to a point where that's got to fall prey to some of the practices of like clickbait and SEO and stuff like that, like things where you're trying to gain an audience and earn money. Like all of these things are being distilled into this mess. Where is the tip of the iceberg at this point? Because it used to be very clear. Where is it now?
You don't have a tip of the iceberg anymore.
No.
Things that peak in the same way that you need a certain degree to get a certain job. Now, the degree of 20 years ago is the masters of today. That increases and increases and increases. But where does it end? There's a point where further education stops.
Yeah.
There's only so far you can go in it. You can get a master's, you can get a doctorate, you can get whatever you want. That ends at some point. When that becomes the entry level, when you have to pay however many thousands, probably 100,000 at that point, to get to that point, what distinguishes you from everybody else?
Mm.
The doctorate probably is the biggest, your PhD is your biggest sort of academic sign of intelligence, whatever now.
But what happens when that bursts?
When everybody gets that, what is the next point? I don't know.
It's going to have to be something brand new, something totally new, that probably isn't... It's probably going to be something democratic, because that's where everything's headed, especially with the internet. Everything's headed to a point where people decide everything. Everything is voted upon by average people, often anonymous people. And so I don't think it's going to be something that's government regulated. I don't think it's going to be something that's standardised in any way. I think it's going to be much more fluid.
Well, my argument for the improvement of university is that in time, like within university, becomes much, much less.
Yeah.
And so you have, whether it's 50-50, 60-40, whatever percentage you want it to be, you have the majority of it online.
Yeah.
And so that buildings, lecturers, teachers, all those fees that are being paid for the land, for the quality, for the food you have to pay, for the rooms you have to sleep in, are cut. And so the debt you accrue is much, much less.
Yeah.
And so it's more accessible. You're not in debt. You're not then living a life of constant financial worry. But then it becomes accessible for everybody. And so everybody does it because they feel they have to do it.
Yeah.
Until there is a viable other option, is that going to change? No. Because university is the option. And unless you have a good reason for explaining why you've not done it, a lot of people frown upon that.
Yeah.
And that was really one of the reasons I eventually succumbed to it. Like most of the people we know that went to university are now done.
Yeah.
Which is a weird situation to be in for me. Because I took however many years I took out and then went and did it. Because I felt, well, if I don't do it, I don't have a practical skill.
Yeah.
That excuses me almost.
Yeah.
I'm not an incredible bricklayer.
Yeah.
I'm not an incredible electrician. I'm not an incredible manual person.
Mm-hmm.
That means I can excuse myself from not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that to fall back on.
Yeah.
So what do I do?
So it's almost like you have to.
Well, I'm backed into a corner to a certain extent. Unless I trust, and I do trust it. It's got me a long way of sort of charisma and vague experience.
Yeah.
Because I can walk in and say, well, no, I've not got a degree, but I've done X, Y, and Z in my 2 years off.
Yeah.
And I can crack a joke with you. That's, to a certain extent, it.
Yeah.
And while that's got me a certain amount of places and I've landed on my feet in many ways, that's not a life.
Yeah.
I can't bank on that forever.
Yeah.
So I feel like I have to get a degree as a safety net. Because basically, with the other argument, I feel like I'm walking a tightrope without it. And if I fall, I've got nothing to back up on.
Yeah.
I've got nothing to catch me. And I'm going to end up in Lidl.
Stocking shelves.
Yeah. You know, in your depressing job.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean anything. There's no guarantees from that degree. Like I have a friend who got a first from King's College London, which is a great university. Did a great subject. Obviously, worked his balls off, and is now a receptionist. What? you have no guarantees from it.
Yeah.
Other than, well, I have a piece of paper now that opens some doors for me, in theory.
Yeah.
But a lot of people also have that.
Yeah.
So it's